So, welcome to another episode of Battlefield to the Boardroom. I am here with Charlie Wells, a recently retired Sergeant Major who has managed to grow his veteran facial hair already. I am Colonel Garth Massey, and we are posting up stuff that we think will help both business and military leaders who are looking to accelerate their growth or get the most out of their community or drive themselves to better levels of performance, especially as we live in this world of change. And if you haven't followed Charlie on LinkedIn, you ought to. He's got a lot of great advice about transitioning, but also just a good perspective on the world. So Charlie, I'm glad you took the time to come here. You're a couple hours behind me, so I know it makes it a little easier on your day, but I thought it'd be fun if we could talk a little bit about some of the strengths that transitioning veterans bring with them. And you mentioned earlier adaptability, which is kind of a theme, but how are we leaving skills behind us that we ought to be bringing with us when we start our new job? So,
well, first, Garth, thanks for having me. And adaptability is a great one. I see people struggle with adaptability, whether it's in the military or now that I'm out. I see people, in the civilian space where I touch every day that struggle with adaptability. So it's certainly not confined to one venue or the other. But I'll tell you specifically, veterans or military folks who are transitioning out of the military. I was telling you this story and it bears repeating. When I went my very first time that I was actually in Iraq, living with Iraqis, the Marine Corps is really good about teaching you operational culture, right? They teach you all about how to get in and immerse yourself in the culture of the folks that you're working with. And, Secretary Mattis was a big believer in it. He always preached over there in Iraq, it's better to make a friend than to shoot somebody, because then you make 20 enemies. So we lived with a lot of Iraqis. So, I went from being kind of a macho infantry first sergeant, to, I think over the course of a deployment, by the end of the deployment, I know maybe some of the folks watching this don't have experience with Arabic cultures, but especially in Iraq, what you would see Iraqi men do walking down the street is, if you were good friends, you would hold hands sometimes. They would just reach out and take you by the hand and lead you somewhere, or they would hold your hands if you were going somewhere together. Right. And, when they would greet you, you would kiss each other on the cheeks. Well, of course, that's just, absolutely anathema to Marines. They just didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I got in with these guys so well that, by the end of the deployment, they would reach out and take me by the hand, and I wouldn't resist. They'd be leading this, grown Marine with his flak jacket and Kevlar and his Nomex gloves on by the hand down the street. And, I'd kiss him on the cheeks when we left. And that's just the way it was. So, it's that kind of thing makes you very successful in whatever space you're in. Yeah. Because if you listen to the story that I just told and you remove the Iraqi element, and you bring in the Amazon element or the Walmart element or the, wherever you work at, right. If you can adapt to that workspace culture that seamlessly, then you're golden. Now, here's where we run into problems in the transition space. Military folks like myself who transition to the civilian world, suddenly they forget that the thing that made them so successful in the military, adaptability, they completely forget that they're adaptable. So when they get out, they panic. Right. Because it's like a drowning man in the deep end of the pool. They think, oh no, what do I do? Man, you're adaptable. Pretend like it's Iraq. Pretend like it's Afghanistan. Yeah. People forget that. But, Garth, there's a powerful lesson in there for people who have never been in the military. If you can just adapt, I heard an NFL announcer say the other day that when it comes to NFL players, the best ability that an NFL player can have is availability. Well, I'll tell you, the best ability you can have as a professional is adaptability, because if you can adapt, man, the world is your oyster.
Actually, it's a great point about, we call it culture. We talk culture a lot, and it's easy to think of culture as another country, when everything around you changes, it's easy when you talk to a Marine and you see the I love me wall in the background, or the, Iwo Jima in the background or something, kind of how you identify in your tribe. But corporate organizations do the same thing. You got that Silicon Valley high ceilings and lots of open spaces and open cubicles, and you've got the IBM, blue shirts, and you've got, like, every company works to develop its culture around what makes them effective. And it's not often that you think of adapting and shaping your will or your abilities to where you go. So I like the way you put that. You're right, because when in Rome is very common when you travel countries, but not when you walk from one company to another company. And so why do you think we leave that? I mean, Marines know that, we study it. Are we letting our guard down when we step out into the corporate world, or what do you see?
Well, I'll tell you, Garth, I think that when you're with your tribe, as you said, there's strength in numbers. You're part of the herd. Even if you're a leader of the herd, you have the herd behind you. When you transition, it's like that one sheep that gets lost from the 99. That one sheep is no longer with the flock. So now the sheep's more vulnerable. So I think as a veteran, when you transition, you feel like you're not with the herd anymore. But in fact, the herd's still there. You just have to reach out. So, because now instead of having active duty military folks around you, you have this cloud of veterans around you. Yes. So you're never outside of your herd. And in fact, your herd can be anywhere. I love other cultures because where I grew up at, there was nothing but white folks. I didn't meet a black man until I was 11 years old. I didn't meet a Hispanic or an Asian person until I went to boot camp. So it was super isolated. So I've always loved other cultures and learning how they work. So for me, my herd is wherever I go, because as you mentioned earlier, I got this accent and I'm kind of a Forrest Gump type. So people like me because I like them and I like talking to them. And, that's kind of the hack on life is if you just are open to new people and new experiences, be surprised how quickly people will take you in and make you their own. Yeah. It happened to me in the Marine Corps. When I was with helicopters, they thought I was a helicopter guy. When I was in the infantry, they thought I was a career infantry guy. So if you're just open to new experiences and learning, man, you'd be surprised at how far you can go.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be willing to try things and embrace them to really, truly be adaptable. I like that. You make a great point too. The VFWs, the American Legions, like they are struggling with membership, but I think that trend is reversing. Even, and for anyone who's watching, like this is actually the first time that Charlie and I have ever spoken. I saw him on LinkedIn, and I have that philosophy that we're an amphibious fighting force in the Marine Corps. There's a beachhead on the soul of every other Marine. And so you can reach out, you get 5 minutes, and usually, or any Marine I've ever talked to gives you 5 minutes. You might screw it up and then you lost your opportunity, or maybe you don't do something that works, but they'll usually give you an opportunity. And we, as part of our adaptability, when we step into the civilian workforce, or any business person out there that's like changing companies or working with new clients or trying a new product, the first thing you got to do is recognize people will give you 5 minutes. They'll talk to you. And sometimes we have gatekeepers, but genuinely, if you can connect as a human being, they'll talk to you, but you got to reach out. So, join a club, go out to an American Legion, go to an event. I'm actually just starting with a new group. It's called Veterans in Residence, and it's Bunker Labs and WeWork put together this 6-month internship where they run veterans through like business development stuff. It's going to be great. And actually, I'll tag it in some of the comments because people can apply. You get free WeWork office space for 6 months while you work through this program. But if you allow yourself to sit in a closet or in your room and just talk about your glory days, then I think all the adaptability muscles just freeze dry and then you're in a lot of trouble. So I think it's a great point. You got to get out, you got to learn because if you don't, you're stuck. Right. You're stuck with whatever attitude you got out with, which is, if it's the tough guy, my tribe was great. And I peaked when I was a Marine. If your best day was the last day you hung your uniform up, in a way, kind of shame on you. Like there's so much more to give. You have 20 plus years of life lessons, like go apply them, share them with other people, give them to other people, and right. Give them freely. I mean, I can just see like even the whole wall behind you, there's a whole bunch of life lessons there. And if you were to give a tip then, so, being adaptable is good. What else would you say to anybody getting out or anybody looking to hire a vet? Like the power of adaptability is huge, but if you wanted to grow your company, like why should you take the time to hunt down veterans?
I think, so if I was hiring a veteran, if I could sit down and have a conversation with that man or that woman and they were comfortable with me, that would be a huge plus for me because a lot of military folks, they have a really hard time, taking off the campaign cover, taking off the hat, taking off the helmet and just being a regular dude or regular gal with you. They have a really hard time with that. Well, that right there screams no adaptability, no social skills. And, those are the folks, if you can't build a relationship, whether it be with a client or with team members in your own company, if your whole relationship in the military was based on what you had on your collar, then you're of no use to a civilian company. So now switching over to the veteran side, I would say out there, if you are a veteran, hey, learn to be comfortable with people. I had this conversation with a guy the other day. He told me, he said, hey, Charlie, I'll be honest with you. He said, I'm an introvert. I'm not an extrovert, so I have a hard time talking to people. I said, hey, it's easy. Let me give you a tip. When you sit down and talk to somebody, make the conversation about them initially. Ask them 3 questions or make 3 observations. So, you and I were talking a moment ago, and you said that you were from Alaska. I know for a fact that if you're a resident in Alaska, if you spent, I think, 30 days a year in Alaska, you actually got a stipend from the state because of the oil there. So if you mention that, I'm going to ask that question. Hey, do you get to spend 30 days a year in Alaska? I'm going to ask you questions like, hey, what's the job market like in Alaska? Have you ever thought about moving back? I'm going to ask you. And then when you mention your kids, hey, I have a 16-year-old son. So the next thing to do is find common ground with somebody. And if you're an introvert, that's how you get that conversation started. And you'll see the conversation gradually start to turn, because the other person will then, they will definitely want to know something about you next. And it's just a natural pinwheel effect. So if you're an introvert, hey, just listen and make 3 observations about someone and ask them questions. That's all you have to do. Ask somebody 3 questions about themselves, ease yourself into the conversation, but do not be afraid.
That is fantastic. But I would also say, if you're an extrovert, the same advice, because if you're an extrovert, you're just going to project. Well, one time I was on a machine gun sitting on a hill, and stop. Like, ask 3 questions. I love that. Ask 3 questions. And I think, honestly, it doesn't matter if you're in an interview. You're in an interview to show your adaptability and your ability to connect with other human beings. That is fantastic advice. Ask 3 questions. I like it a lot. Man, what a pleasure. Great to meet you, Charlie. And I see you popping up on social media a lot, and I got to believe, that is growing your network even larger. And I hope you've enjoyed the transition. I know you just got out.
Yep.
But there's so much great stuff out there. And I would just tell you, keep it up. And if you're not connected with Charlie, I don't know if you're open to network connections, but
yeah, absolutely. Anybody can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm there every single day, several times a day. In fact, you can find me on YouTube, Charles Wells. I do the Facebook a little bit, but I'm not a lot. I'm on Instagram because, that's where my kids are. So I am on Instagram, Walk It Off 76. So you could absolutely get me in any of those venues. But LinkedIn is my number one, and I'm always open to connections.
Yeah. And so help us out. Hitting like is good. If you made it this far in the video, hit share, make a comment, ask a question, reach out. If you're not connected to myself or Charlie, you should. And hey, aloha. I know you're out in the beautiful Isles right now. And so that's very good. And I appreciate you taking all this time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right.